A Prime Minister who can't even command the support of half of his own party. But I'm sorry to say, I now believe that he is unfit to be the Prime Minister of our country.
Nigel Farage stuns Parliament. Keir Starmer left speechless after bold revelation. You're not going to believe what just happened in Parliament. It started like any other debate, quiet, formal, the usual exchange of polite jabs between party lines. But then, Nigel Farage stood up, and within moments, the entire chamber fell silent. You could see it on Keir Starmer's face: surprise, discomfort, maybe even shock. Because what Farage said next, nobody saw coming. Now, let's set the stage here. This wasn't just another day in politics. The tension in Westminster has been rising for weeks, growing criticism, pressure from the public, questions about trust and transparency. Farage, as always, walked straight into the center of that storm. Calm, deliberate, and ready to strike. And when he did, it hit hard. In his trademark style, Farage began by calling out what he described as a pattern of political double-talk. He didn't name names right away, but everyone in that chamber knew who he was looking at. Then came the line that froze the room. "It's time the British people saw what really goes on behind the curtain," he said. "Because if they did, this entire system would look very different." You could almost hear the air being sucked out of the room. Starmer, sitting across the benches, kept his composure, but not for long. And here's where it gets interesting. Farage pulled out what he called public footage, a clip that had already been circulating online, and used it as evidence of what he described as political hypocrisy in plain sight. The footage itself wasn't classified or secret, but the timing of his use was calculated. It showed a public exchange, one that painted a very different picture of what Starmer had previously said about his stance on immigration and public spending. Farage let it play for a few seconds, paused, then looked across the floor and said, "So which version should the people believe, the one for Parliament or the one for the cameras?" It wasn't a bombshell of scandal, it was a bombshell of contradiction. And that's what left Keir Starmer momentarily speechless. Now, to be fair, this wasn't the first time Farage has cornered a rival in Parliament. But this one felt different. Because in a political world where every word is rehearsed, every sentence is polished, Farage did something few dare to. He caught a leading figure off guard, live, on record, and with the nation watching. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. And it hit at the heart of something much deeper: credibility. Almost instantly, the clip spread across social media. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok all flooded with the same reaction: disbelief. One user wrote, "Farage just exposed how fake some of these speeches are, no wonder Starmer froze." Another said, "For once, Parliament felt real. No scripts, no spin, just raw confrontation." And perhaps the most telling comment of all, "He didn't need to shout. The silence said everything." But let's look at this from both sides. Supporters of Starmer argue that Farage deliberately took things out of context, using short clips to misrepresent a broader point. They say this is classic Farage, taking complex issues and simplifying them into emotional moments that make great TV but distort reality. Meanwhile, Farage's camp insists this was long overdue, that voters deserve to see politicians being held accountable for their contradictions, not just their press releases. And in truth, both sides have a point. Because this wasn't really about the footage itself. It was about something bigger: the growing sense that British politics is becoming more about performance than principle. Now here's the irony. Keir Starmer built his political image around being calm, measured, and unshakable. But in that one brief moment when Farage hit him with something unscripted, that composure cracked. He didn't shout. He didn't lash out. But his silence, his hesitation, spoke volumes. For a man who prides himself on control, that moment was rare. Human. Vulnerable. And for a country tired of polished answers, that made it powerful. Inside sources say Labour MPs were split afterward. Some felt Farage's move was cheap theatre, a distraction from real issues. Others quietly admitted it was effective. One senior Labour aide was quoted saying, "We can't keep ignoring how easily Farage connects emotionally. He knows how to trigger moments that feel real even when we disagree with every word." And that right there might be the key. Because in politics today, perception is power. Farage has mastered the art of political storytelling, turning tension into theater. But what's fascinating is how his words often spark conversations that go far beyond the moment. This one, for example, has reignited debates about transparency, political authenticity, and whether leaders truly practice what they preach. Starmer supporters have rushed to defend him, saying this is just another Farage headline grab. But for the public, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about who feels honest. And right now, that's the battle being fought. Not over facts, but over feelings. So what happens next? You can bet both men will use this moment to their advantage. Farage will continue framing himself as the man who asks what no one else will, the outsider challenging the establishment. Starmer, meanwhile, will likely double down on his leadership image, calm, professional, above the noise, hoping to remind voters that passion doesn't always mean substance. But make no mistake, that short, tense exchange has changed the tone. Because for millions watching at home, the takeaway wasn't about one piece of footage or one line of debate. It was about exposure. Not of secrets, but of reality. And that's why this moment matters. In an era where trust in politics is hanging by a thread, every moment of authenticity, every unscripted second hits harder than 1,000 campaign ads. Nigel Farage didn't need to drop a bombshell. All he had to do was remind people what truth sounds like when it's not rehearsed. And as for Keir Starmer, that brief silence might follow him longer than any speech he's ever written. Because sometimes, the quiet moments speak the loudest.